Okay, thank you guys for joining. So here we go. Here's the deal. I'll be like Joe Biden. Here's the deal. Um, we're gonna have the chat and closed until it's time for Q&A. And please remain on mute. And after that, I will announce the time that's been allotted for our Q&A after the presentation so that we can get the full presentation without interruption because our speaker has some really good stuff to share with us that we really need to learn more about. So I want to ask you guys and encourage you to be curious as you listen tonight. And I know that you're going to show respect, and I know you're going to suspend judgment, but if you don't, I want to remind you that it's important that we do so. And also just listen very intently and be authentic in your listening, and like I say, suspend judgment. And when you do have time to ask your questions, I want you to be really conscious of sharing the airtime, share the space with other people that might want to ask questions too. And also, I would just want to remind you as we're moving forward, if you would just really have your questions focus only on the presentation for tonight. I know we have information that we would like to share, but I want Yvonne's presentation to be her presentation. So we'll go from there. So at this time, Yvonne's been here before, so I don't feel like I need to really formally introduce her. She's our friend now. Doesn't take long to be friends around this place, Yvonne, just in case you didn't know. She's the lead presenter for the organization called Freedom Writers Collaborative. And I am just delighted that you have come back to share more information with us on this critical topic, Project 2025. And she also brought a team member with her tonight. And if you don't mind, if you would introduce him, that would be awesome.
This is Jeffrey Levine. He's a longtime friend of mine. We worked together at IBM. And when I started with this small group of people, I told Jeff about it. And he joined us, and not only joined us, became kind of the person who accelerated our ability to share our toolkits. He managed to get us a partnership with Demcast USA, and that really accelerated our ability to spread our toolkits. I'll tell you about it in a few minutes. Let me just, if you don't mind, I'll just go ahead and get started.
Yes,
And Jeffrey is going to pull up the slide deck.
Oh, sorry.
No, the first slide.
I got it.
Okay.
Now?
No, I see the video.
I just switched. You don't see the.
No.
Let me stop share and do it again.
Okay. Good old Zoom.
Yeah.
Terrific. That's great. Well, just to start off, I just want to thank Evelyn and Move On People of Color Caucus for giving Freedom Writers Collaborative this opportunity to share our deep dive into Project 2025. It is, if you don't know about it, it's a chilling, nearly 1,000-page conservative leadership mandate with a great deal of specificity as to how it will be implemented. Project 2025 to me feels like a compilation of The Handmaid's Tale, George Orwell's 1984, and Fahrenheit 451, all coming together in this horrible and dangerous plan to end democracy as we know it. They weren't quite ready in 2017 when Trump actually won. They weren't expecting him to win. But if Trump gets elected this November, and they are pouring everything they can behind him to make sure that happens, they will be ready to press the button on this plan the moment he is declared the winner. They will not wait for the inauguration. But before I begin, let me just take a step back here and tell you how I became aware of and alarmed by Project 2025. And it actually kind of involves MoveOn.org. I belong to this multi-state indivisible group called Freedom Writers Collaborative. And we build ready-made, research-validated, issues-based toolkits around issues and progressive issues and candidates. And we do this to educate voters, especially digital natives in the 18 to 24 group, because they told Pew Research they get 100% of their news online. So in the 2023 summer of 2023, we Freedom Writers sat down and we started talking about Project 2025 and decided to build a social media toolkit on the subject. And the incredibly talented graphic artists on our team who created the memes and this presentation and the things you're going to see throughout this presentation, along with the video you're going to see in a few minutes, he created all of this. My role on this team is writing text to accompany the memes that go in our toolkit. So I downloaded the Heritage Foundation's 925-page manifesto to get talking points so that I could write text that would be relevant to James' graphics. And then after I rather passionately raised the alarm about Project 2025 in that Move On meeting that Ms. Evelyn hosted, that was back in February. I had a hair on fire concern that there just didn't seem to be any urgency or even awareness of this sinister plan. And the press wasn't even covering it. So when Ms. Evelyn asked me to make a presentation to the group, I went back to the Heritage Foundation's PDF and I read it more closely and pulled out some of the more distressing details, which I'm going to share with you tonight. But before I do, my fellow Freedom Writer, Jeff, is going to play the Project 2025 video that we released with the subject toolkit. I just warn you, it's depressing and it's intense.
President Trump, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you.
I want to dive right into this, a lot to get to.
Good.
The media have failed to expose Donald Trump in a framework that communicates the danger of a 2024 Republican presidency. They continue to treat him as a regular candidate and not the leader of a dangerous anti-democracy party. His Republican Party doesn't even have a platform and has become the first party in modern history without one. The obvious reason is that without a stated platform, their unpopular ideas cannot be challenged in open debate. But in their hubris, they made a mistake.
Project 2025 is a call for you to come work here, Washington, D.C.
A cluster of right-wing extremist groups got together and put all of their dangerous ideas in a 920-page document called Mandate for Leadership, Project 2025. This is the playbook for what they want to happen to America, should Trump or any other Republican president take office after winning the next election. Project 2025 is the doom of our multicultural democracy and the end of the rule of law. It dispenses with constitutional checks and balances and concentrates almost unlimited power in the executive branch. The diabolical plan that is Project 2025 was created by Christian nationalists and funded by the fossil fuel industry. Project 2025 has action plans to take away the rights of minorities, quote-unquote leftists, LGBTQIA plus Americans, and anyone who opposes extremist right-wing ideology. Project 2025 is the Mein Kampf of our age, the fully formed master plan for the takeover of the federal government and its weaponization against its own citizens. Now that we know their plan, we can alert voters to this danger. Help us spread the word by going to www.freedomwriterscollaborative.org and share our Project 2025 social media kit.
Thank you, Jeff. So for the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to be taking you through some details that some of you might lose sleep, knowing that if Joe Biden doesn't win in November and Donald Trump does win, we will immediately begin living in a United States of America that we will not recognize. Thanks to Project 2025, if Trump wins, this is probably the last vote that we, the people, will ever be able to cast. If Trump wins, the Heritage Foundation is ready to pull the trigger on all these well-defined elements that I'm going to take you through in just a very few minutes. And they're going to implement this the moment that the race is called for Donald Trump. So we have to make sure that doesn't happen. They will not wait for the inauguration. They're ready to start. And like Robert De Niro said outside the courthouse during felon Trump's election interference trial, if he wins, he will never leave office. And that's a promise. Next slide, please. Project 2025 was devised under the Heritage Foundation, aided by more than 100 right-wing organizations. They have built corporate-level execution plans, all intent on packing the next GOP administration with extreme loyalists to Donald Trump. We can't go through all of those leaders, but there are a couple of names I thought you might recognize, and we just marked them off here. For example, Mark Meadows. He's Trump's former chief of staff. He's now CEO of this Conservative Partnership Institute. And with their $36 million annual budget from private donors, mostly oil and gas related donors, his group operates as a full service nerve center for right-wing activity and a breeding ground for the next generation of Trump loyalists. Or take Stephen Miller. He's the architect of Trump's family separation at the border policy. He's CEO of an organization called America First Legal. They're going after diversity, equity, and inclusion in education and even private businesses under the grievance of reverse racism. And speaking of education, there's Charlie Kirk. He's CEO of Turning Point USA. They advocate for conservative policies in high school, colleges, and universities. And some of the college presidents who have been called to Congress to, testify on one thing or another have been fired from their institutions because of pressure from Kirk, who's a donor to those many colleges and universities. By the way, Turning Point held their annual conference just last weekend. And of course, Mad King Trump was their featured speaker. Please, next slide, please. This devious plan has 4 pillars. The first pillar is the mandate for leadership. That's the conservative promise, they call it. Think of this as their policy Bible. These are their words, not mine, by the way. The entire book's sole purpose is to reshape federal policy to shift from societal and constitutional norms that we've lived in under for like 248 years. It could result in termination of our freedoms, or we can alert people to these dangers and save our fragile representative democracy that has, until Trump came along, been the envy of the world. Pillar number 2 is their personnel database, where resumes from conservative scholars, academics, and policy experts are going to be compiled. You can think of this as the conservative-only LinkedIn database, where authors of this policy have set goals of having at least 20,000 recruits already in the database as a way of having a readily available pool of ideologically aligned people to pull from when it comes to filling positions they plan to create as they fire the civil servants who hold those jobs today, just as soon as they take control of the reins of government. Again, their words and not mine. And they're going to streamline the confirmation process so they can make sure this time there are no hiccups. They weren't ready in 2017, but they're ready now. The third pillar is the Presidential Administrative Academy. This is an online educational training system built to indoctrinate potential U.S. government employees under the rule of the next conservative regime or MAGA Republican president. The people who submit their resumes and apply for these jobs are first required to make a loyalty pledge to the president and to obey dear leaders' every command or face dismissal. You might remember that Trump actually fired Director Jim Comey just days after they met because he asked for a loyalty pledge, and he was told by Jim Comey, he said, "My pledge is to the Constitution of the United States and to the rule of law, not to a person." And he was summarily dismissed. As angry as I will always be with Comey for reopening the Clinton email probe just days before the election, I do believe that he thinks he was doing it under honor of duty and not for political purposes. But still, I can't forgive him for the horror and hatred he helped unleash when Trump, took over our country. Pillar number 4 outlines the transition plan in a 180-day playbook that is driven by the policy agenda itself as a roadmap. The Heritage Foundation's preamble, as they call it, has been around for decades, all the way back to the Clinton era and Newt Gingrich's contract with America. Regardless, these are the 4 pillars that make up Project 2025. Now, why should we care and what can we do about it? Well, first, we need to look in the details so we know exactly what they're trying to accomplish. So if you I did a chapter by chapter deep dive so I could capture these details. And I'm going to take you through some of those now so that we can discuss the actions that we need to take place to make sure everyone knows how important it is to vote in November and to vote for the only functioning political party that still believes in our democracy. So Jeff, next slide. This is important to understand. One of the key elements of Project 2025's administrative goal is to reinstate the executive order that Trump put in place known as Schedule F. That it gave him the ability to reclassify thousands of employees as at-will workers and give the administration the ability to fire employees who don't agree with or follow the extremist policies suggested by Project 2025. The project has created a training academy that I mentioned earlier for potential employees for the next administration, which, quote, provides aspiring appointees with insights, background knowledge, and expertise in governance to immediately begin rolling back policies and advancing conservative ideas in the federal government, end quote. The goal of the training, which consists currently of 4 online courses on subjects such as Conservative Governance 101 and the administrative state and the regulatory process, is, quote, to prepare and equip future political appointees now to be ready on day 1 of the next conservative administration, end quote. Project 2025 makes it clear that the Department of Justice is not independent from the executive branch and implies that the agency will be used to take legal retribution against whomever Trump decides to investigate. And Project 2025's director, Paul Dance, recently appeared on twice federally indicted Steve Bannon's War Room podcast to encourage viewers from the far right to send their resumes and participate in Project 2025's training to recruit extreme loyalists to the next GOP administration. Next slide, please. References to religion are made 115 times, and here are some of those highlights. A healthy society is based on the biblical definition of a family, a mother, a father, and children. LGBTQ families will not be recognized as such. This plan encourages private businesses to follow the Supreme Court ruling that affirmed discrimination against LGBTQ people, as in the case of the fake case the justices took up, affirming the case of a web designer who said he refused to build a website for gay people, but he turned out that he does build websites for gay people, and he is a heterosexual male with female wife and children, and he didn't even know his name was being used in that lawsuit. Or the cake maker who refused to bake a wedding cake for a gay couple. The Supreme Court affirmed that it's active discrimination as well. Those organizations I shared with you earlier are behind those cases and are summarily being brought before a willing Federalist Society-owned Supreme Court. Folks, we have two justices in their 70s, Alito and Thomas. If Trump wins, they could both retire and just be replaced with younger versions of themselves, who, with other conservative justices, will spend the next 30 years stripping away all of our rights. They intend to mandate Sunday, the Sabbath day, as a mandatory day off work, even for private businesses. And pastors and Catholics for Trump, a real organization, are mobilizing clergy to spread violent Christian nationalism and lies from their pulpits. Trump claims to be a president, that a president should have absolute immunity for anything he does, including being able to arrest, imprison, and even execute his perceived enemies. On the face, it's absurd. However, the Supreme Court took up that case after a 3-judge panel on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia unanimously rejected Trump's claim back on February 6th. The conspiracy theorist in me makes me suspicious that the Supreme Court is waiting to release their ruling on this absolute immunity case for the last day of their term. So when they rule 6-3 and give him what he wants, so that they can quickly and quietly leave for their summer break, having made Trump's delay until after the election wish come true. Next slide, please. On the issue of reproductive rights, these people actually want to establish what they intend to call the Department of Life. Folks, this is right out of Margaret Atwood's 1985's Handmaid's Tale, which is a fictional dystopian view of women losing their rights as citizens and serving as vessels to procreate for wealthy and powerful white men. If you haven't read that book, it's worth the read, because this is happening now. With the next Republican administration, you should expect a national abortion ban. You should expect women and their doctors to be criminally prosecuted for providing or receiving reproductive services. And as was done in Mississippi, they will criminalize the purposeful or accidental destruction of unfertilized frozen embryos in all states. And to put a cherry on that, they want to eliminate no-fault divorce so that women who are in abusive marriages won't be able to get out of those marriages unless their abusive husband agrees. Really? Next slide, please. Under law enforcement, they want to terminate any unlawful investigations into the newly elected president or his prior cabinet. We know they've all committed crimes. If elected, Trump probably will pardon himself. He says he won't, but most of what comes out of his mouth is a lie. And he promises to pardon those convicted criminals who attempted to prevent the peaceful transfer of power on January 6th. Trump calls them hostages. They promise military and or police crackdowns on lawful protesters, along with jail time or death for protesters without due process. And something Trump really wants to do, and actually did do during the Black Lives Matter protest, which is to send the military into blue cities that he deems loyalists and high crime. New York City, Chicago, Seattle, Philadelphia, and so on. Why? Because they're urban cities with diverse populations and they didn't vote for him. Clearly, this is a dog whistle. And naturally, they desperately want to eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion, along with affirmative action programs across the government, military, and even private businesses. And by the way, DEI is mentioned 39 times, and affirmative action, equity, and inclusion 90 times. They are clearly coming after people who look like some of us. Next slide, please. Project 2025 eliminates federal protection for citizens, including not protecting hate crimes against LGBTQ people. It halts all research against gender-affirming reassignment and defines transgender citizens as pornographers and groomers who should all be prosecuted imprisoned, and removed from Christian society. And of course, they want to reinstate the Clinton era don't ask, don't tell policy for the military. Next slide. There's not really a whole lot to say here. Project 2025 gets most of its funding from the oil, gas, and coal industries. They want to end what they see as government interference in energy decisions and stop the war on oil and natural gas, and to make sure that private companies that threaten our climate and our planet are no longer federally regulated. And next slide, please. As you might imagine, immigrants will not do well in the authoritarian version of America. They want to revoke immigration benefits that have traditionally been granted to unaccompanied migrant children. And you won't be surprised that the word alien and alien children was used 37 times. These people really hate immigrants. And you won't believe their plans for dreamers, including blocking financial aid for up to 2/3 of all American college students if their state permits certain immigrant groups, including dreamers with legal status, to access in-state tuition. And they'll terminate the legal status of 500,000 dreamers by eliminating staff time for reviewing and processing renewal applications. They suspend updates to the annual eligible countries list for H-2A and H-2B temporary worker visas, thereby excluding most populations from filling critical gaps in many of the agriculture, construction, and hospitality and forest sectors. Imagine how many professionals we will lose, especially in the medical and scientific research sectors. They bar US citizens from qualifying for federal housing subsidies if they live with anyone who is not a US citizen or legal permanent resident. And they will force states to share driver's licenses and tax information with federal authorities or risk losing federal funding. Florida actually already requires hospitals to report any non-residents to Florida state government anytime someone who looks a certain way can't prove their immigration status and they come in for medical care. Well, the day that he signed that, these people said, we're not stupid. Many who worked in agriculture and construction industries dropped their tools that very day or let their fruits and other crops that they were harvesting rot on the ground, and they moved themselves and their families to other friendlier states. Next slide, please. They plan to eliminate the Department of Education and send our tax dollars to support Christian schools. They're dumbing down what teachers can teach and allow groups like Moms for Liberty to determine what your kids and your grandkids can learn or read. We already see what they're doing to dismantle the public education system. They're banning books, they're threatening teachers, librarians, members of school boards, eliminating slavery from the history of the United States. Or when it is discussed, they want kids to believe that slaves somehow benefited by gaining useful skills. And by the way, slaves brought many of those skills with them from their homelands and taught their masters. Next slide, please. There are plans for slashing funding for the Department of Justice and dismantling FBI and the Department of Homeland Security, sharply reducing environmental and climate change regulations to favor, of course, the fossil fuel production industries. They eliminate the Department of Commerce and end the independence of federal agencies like the Federal Communications Commission and Federal Trade Commission. In this dystopia, money and power will prevail. We will have our very own set of oligarchs. That and having Trump back in office will make people like Vladimir Putin, Bibi Netanyahu, and Viktor Orban very happy. As I mentioned earlier, Project 2025 under Trump's second term and the reinstatement of Schedule F would begin purging nonpartisan civil servant workers like EPA scientists, IRS accountants, and replacing them with unqualified Trump toadies. During his first term, he sent U.S. Department of Agriculture researchers an ultimatum: lose your job or move yourselves and your families to Kansas at your own expense. Now, why did he do that? Well, because agricultural researchers had the audacity to fund and publish objective analyses of issues such as climate change, the efficiency of food assistance programs, and tax cuts that mostly benefit the richest farmers. Trump just did not receive that well. The rank and file government employees who were able to prevent some of Trump's greatest successes last time around, like not following his orders to have his military shoot protesters in the knees, or not seizing voting machines to overturn the election, next time that'll all be gone. Our most vulnerable government victim is the Justice Department, starting, it seems, with the FBI, which they've mentioned 119 times throughout that section. Trump and his acolytes have been casting shade on the FBI for the past 8 years, but the rhetoric has intensified since the arrest and conviction of the January 6th insurrectionists, or again, he calls them hostages. And he promises to pardon when he gets back in office, and for what he calls the raid on his home at Mar-a-Lago to retrieve classified information that belongs to the National Archive. His missing love letter from Kim Jong-un was what got their attention and got him busted. My next slide, please. Restructuring government communications means complete destruction of the independent press, which under our democracy has heretofore been called the fourth estate because of the role the independent press plays as an unofficial fourth branch of government to keep the government in check and working within the Constitution for the good of its citizens. Project 2025 demands a centralized media strategy. The project aims at centralizing control messaging across government agencies to ensure consistency and alignment with the administration's goals. Each department will appoint a strategic communicator to ensure adherence to a centralized media strategy, each aligned with the same conservative messaging framework. They want to use the Federal Communications Commission to enforce stricter regulations on media outlets, possibly revisiting the fairness doctrine or similar policies to ensure what they describe as balanced coverage. The project also calls for revisiting media ownership rules to potentially reduce consolidation and promote a wider diversity of voices more aligned with conservative viewpoints. Trump is threatening to pull the licenses of NBC Network so that he can shut down MSNBC because of its criticism of him. And he called the president of ABC Network personally, demanding that they fire comedian Jimmy Kimmel because he makes jokes about it. Oh, poor little snowflake. And let's not forget that at the end of Trump's disastrous first term, he demanded that the head of the government agency for global media fire the head of Radio Free Europe, whose mission is to provide accurate and reliable information to audiences in countries where media freedom is limited or restricted. This organization has been around since World War II. The next one here, combating misinformation, is almost comical, coming from a party that spews misinformation all day, every day on right-wing media channels. And despite the irony, their disinformation task force will be deployed to identify and counteract misinformation, particularly focused on narratives that seem harmful to conservative agendas. They want to promote only trusted news sources and emphasize supporting those that align with conservative principles, potentially through government endorsements and partnerships. Under legal and legislative action, they want to change libel laws to make it easier for public figures, including politicians, to sue media outlets for defamation. And they're proposing reforms to Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act to hold social media platforms more accountable for content moderation practices that are perceived to be biased against conservative voices. And finally, they're considering the expansion of government-sponsored media outlets to disseminate official information directly to the public. In 2022, Russia's President Vladimir Putin signed into law a measure criminalizing reporting that contradicts the government's version of events. Can you imagine having outlets like Fox News and Breitbart as our only trusted news sources? Next slide, please. So I'm gonna ask you to let this slide sink in for a moment. 90% of the items with quotes came from Trump himself. He loves the idea of having a civil war. He wants to use the military to shoot peaceful protesters. He will abandon our NATO allies and let Putin, quote, do whatever the hell he wants with Ukraine, end quote. And when he says that he will be a dictator on day one, believe him. Also believe that he will never leave office. The press and even private citizens who dare defy or criticize him will go to prison until Trump figures out how he wants to impose additional punishments on them as he stews in his hatred for anyone who doesn't fall at his beck and command. He calls the press the enemy of the people. He calls immigrants vermin and animals, and he says they're poisoning the blood of our country. He promises to use his police and military, to round up and put immigrants from certain countries into internment camps and ship them off to countries of his choice, whether they've ever been to that country or not. He's already done that. He did that in his first term. And remember, the authoritarians in our lifetime who, upon taking power, ordered the arrest and execution of numerous political opponents that they perceived as threats, including military officers loyal to the former leader, and anybody that he felt was a threat, they felt was a threat. Joseph Stalin, Saddam Hussein, Cuba's Fidel Castro, Vladimir Putin, who seems to have a problem with his rivals falling out of windows. But they're all tyrants, and tyrants put their potential rivals in their place, not to seize power, but to hold on to it. And I repeat, if Trump wins, he'll never leave office. He will be a tyrant. Next slide, please. Remember back in 2016 when Hillary Clinton labeled the people around Trump as a basket of deplorables? Well, I tried to envision the deplorables who might fill his cabinet. So just point out a few of them. Elise Stefanik, for example, she wants to be VP so badly she can taste it. Kash Patel has already said he wants to be FBI director. And how about Attorney General Matt Gaetz? That's a frightening thought. Michael Flynn, who was fired by the Obama administration and convicted later of lying to the FBI in the Trump administration. And he's someone who cozies up to Vladimir Putin. Can you imagine he in a cabinet? And can you imagine Tucker Carlson as Secretary of State? In his second term, there will not be any of the adults in the room like General Mattis or former National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, or even former Chief of Staff John Kelly, to protect the country from Trump's worst impulses. Every one of these folks in this cabinet will ask, how high, Mr. President, when he tells them to jump. Next slide, please. The road to authoritarianism starts with the election of Donald Trump. An activist at a meeting I attended a few weeks ago said something that struck with me. And that is, realistic fear and knowledge are important persuaders. Every American needs to adopt a hair-on-fire posture about the implications of a Trump victory, knowing that the Heritage Foundation will be ready to pull the trigger on an all well thought out, defined elements of Project 2025, the very moment the race is called for Trump. Again, for the third time, they won't wait for the inauguration. Next slide, please. I just want to show you some of the memes that are in addition to the ones you've seen on the presentation. And my fellow freedom writer, Jeff, is going to show you how to access our toolkits. And then I'd love to come back and answer your questions.
Hello, everyone. I'm gonna see if I can share the toolkits that we have. Just 1 second while I set up. So this is the homepage of the freedomwriterscollaborative.org. And you'll see all these boxes, which we call tiles, which are actually independent toolkits. So for example, Yvonne was talking about 2025. Well, we've got like over 65 other topics that we cover on our homepage for people that are on social media. And I think Yvonne said that almost 100% of the youth, millennials in our country, get their news from social media. So what I'll do right now is pull up one of our toolkits as an example, and I will pull up our abortion toolkit, being that this is the second anniversary of the Dobbs decision. And if you scroll down, you'll see all these posts that at one click of a button, we could post to a number of social media sites, including Twitter or X, Facebook, LinkedIn. What is this one?
That's Threads. That's a new
That's
one.
Threads and
That's
Instagram
Instagram.
and WhatsApp. So these are the platforms that we support now. You select your platform, just click on the meme that you want, and it will go right to your social media page.
Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, well, thank you guys. It was an awesome, scary presentation.
It's scary, isn't it?
Just mind-boggling, I'll tell you what. Now, you added a few more details from the last time, and I was like, oh my gosh, you had me leaning and bending in. So, okay,
We do
thank you
have
guys
one
so
more
much.
slide to share
Pardon
Oh,
me?
about
that's
how
right.
to access our information.
Okay,
If you don't mind, do you mind?
take it away. Yes, please.
So here's some information about how to contact us on email. We have QR codes for how to visit our social media kits on our homepage, how to receive our toolkits when they're released. We actually release about 2 toolkits a week, which is a lot of work. I don't know if Yvonne said we're only 4 people, but we're
No,
busy.
I didn't, yeah.
But we release 2 toolkits a week. We have a video library on TikTok and YouTube. And we showed you just one of our videos. Go check out the other ones because you'll be amazed how compelling they are. Again, you can receive our toolkits by joining our mailing list. And you could, there's also a video on how to use our toolkits, which we have on our channel.
Thanks, Jeff. That's great. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you. So just a reminder for your for the Q&A time, we want the questions to be only about this topic so that Yvonne will not be taken off guard. And no commentary if you can steer clear of that, just questions about what she's talked about. So Melissa, see your hand.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi, it's good to see you again, Yvonne.
You
And yeah,
too.
I'm kind of like with Miss Evelyn. It's like you've added things to the presentation, which makes it even scarier. Um, one of the things I was thinking about when you were presenting, and I know this may seem like a really weird question, but is there a way that and I am happy and happy to help with this. So I don't want to just say, well, you know what you should do. Um, is there a way that there could be a presentation geared towards some of those Republican surge voters that, I mean, the reason why I ask that is, for instance, I've been trying to have, I mean, because this is great. I mean, we're all among friends. We know how important it is.
Sure, sure.
But like I was sharing with Miss Evelyn today when we met, I had a conversation with our next door neighbors that I know, I mean, they had a big Trump sign in their garage.
Mm,
But I knew, well, one, I just had to talk to them. I mean, and I knew that I just knew I had to talk to them. And so I did. And I think, and they at least agreed to like read the Liz Cheney book. But
mhm.
what I'm wondering is if there's a presentation that could be geared towards those folks. I mean, and I was looking at the slide that you had, and it's like, yeah, most of that stuff they really support. But like, for instance, Social Security and Medicare and workers' rights. And I've got to believe that there are some other things in that. I mean, I haven't read the whole Project 2025. I've had to like digest it in brief bits. But I'm just wondering if there's a presentation, even if it's a slide deck that is part of the toolkit that I could share or that other people could share with people, because even if it's even even if we can just convince them not to vote,
Mhm.
you know, some of those people that are not extremists, I'm just curious. I
Well,
mean, and it might be something to think about.
it's definitely on their on their list. They want to get rid of Social Security, Medicare, and
Right,
they want to. Yeah, they do. I just picked out the things that are going to impact us globally.
right,
But yeah,
right.
you're right. You know, there are probably presentations out there that cover that. And I know we have a toolkit. Jeff, don't we have a toolkit that covers uh, issues of health? I know we do.
We have a healthcare toolkit, uh, and we're working on others all the time. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Or
just
I'm,
check
like
out
I
our
said,
homepage.
I'm
Mhm.
happy to help. Miss Evelyn has my contact information and I know she has
Oh,
yours. So, you know, feel
okay.
free to, we can chat about it because again, I don't want to add something to your plate. I'm happy to
Melissa, maybe it's
help.
some of the non-culture wars content within
Right.
Project 2025 that we
Yeah.
should
Mhm.
hone in on that talks about, you know, real life consequences of,
Yeah.
okay, we
That's
got
a
it.
good
Thank you.
idea. Okay.
Great
Thank you.
question, Melissa. Thank you. Bob, I
Yeah.
think I see your hand moving. There you go.
I heard something recently about foreign countries doing this kind of planning about how to deal with the United States if Trump wins. And I'm
Yes.
wondering if you're getting any interaction with them about the impact internationally that they. And I'm also wondering, is it possible for other countries to help somehow with this election? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that the GOP is getting international money from
Oh yeah, they are.
us. And
The only
I don't know if that's
country.
illegal or what. Have you looked at any part of that kind of thing?
Well, Jeff and I attend a meeting twice a week with Heather Booth and Bob Kramer, and they have like about 1,000 organizations that are working together. But many of them are working on foreign. We get briefed on foreign interference in our elections and what's going on in corners of the world. But we can learn about it, we can react to it, but it's going to take our government, a competent government, to actually address it. That's why we've got to get the word out that we're head first marching into authoritarianism, and countries like Russia and several others, they're just really happy to see it, and they want Trump back in office.
I would say also that they're focused on cultural issues. So if you're not happy with LGBTQ plus rights, abortion, being able to make your own decisions, all the church and state issues. A lot of that stuff, funding for that is coming from Russia and totalitarian regimes that we need to combat against.
Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing in the House of Representatives, one decision after another based on this influence that we're getting from these regimes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bob.
I also want to say, I really like Melissa's concept of getting Republicans not necessarily vote for Joe, but not to vote for Trump. I mean, that might be a strategy that would make some sense to people who are scared that he might really be dangerous. Anyway.
We have a toolkit called the Case Against Donald Trump. So encourage you to go take a look at those toolkits. There's a lot of really good information in there. And we, as I said earlier, we try to make it fact-based. So we do a lot of research in order to put the text with that meme, and make it as easy as possible for people to share it online.
Thank you, Bob. Are there other questions? We're right at the hour, about 4 minutes before we have to log off. Great questions from Bob and Melissa. Who wants to follow?
Let me write down Melissa's name here. Are you any kin to Molly John Fast on MSNBC?
No, I took my husband's name, so.
Oh, okay. All right. No other questions? Anything? No? Okay.
Okay, so I
What
guess
can
you
you
kind
do
of
to
already
go?
given the call to action, haven't you, throughout?
Yes. And I'm going to send the presentation to Ms. Evelyn, and anyone who is interested in any section of it, just take out or just make sure people know, and make sure they know to vote again for the only political party that still believes in freedom.
Yeah.
I mean, it really boils down to freedom.
And you guys will have access to this recording also. And once I get it downloaded. So if you've already shared your last word, then I'll stop the recording now, Yvonne, unless Jeff wants to have something to say before I do.
Oh, you're on mute, Jeff.
I just want to thank you for hosting us. It's a pleasure to work with you all. I think you can tell from Yvonne's presentation that she is passionate about what she talks about. She's very careful about the things that she says. So I'm just thoroughly impressed with their work on Project 2025. And she's been presenting in almost 20 different venues so far on this topic, and the requests keep pouring in, but she's my idol. Thank you, Yvonne.
Oh, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you both for being here. And I have to agree with what you're saying, Jeff. You're phenomenal, Yvonne. You're just a phenomenal presenter. And I'm not really afraid, like I said at the beginning, but it just brought to reality what we're up against. And that we have to these toolkits are awesome to be able to use and share. And so I believe that we as 12 people here tonight have a great responsibility to pick these toolkits up and share them with our groups of people that we know. So I really appreciate this. It's
Especially the young folks in your life, because they're
Yeah.
out there all day long.
Yeah.
These things are in their hands constantly.
Exactly.